Hello and welcome to our 8th lecture on space. And this is our part 1 of many lectures on space. In this module, we'll have 2 lectures and some demos that will cover linear perspective. So we're going to be dealing with 1-point and 2-point perspective. And throughout this module, we'll be getting a better understanding of how to depict three-dimensional space. So we'll be doing less drawings where the space doesn't make as much sense, and hopefully getting images that are more proportionate and have a better, deeper, more accurate sense of space. So we're going to be translating three-dimensional space into a flat image. We're going to be learning tricks to trick the eye into forgetting that we're looking at a picture plane, a flat piece of paper, and that we're actually looking at something that has depth. So space was really hard to depict. It took a lot of time to understand some of the techniques that we're doing. So don't get discouraged right off the bat. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of inventions and techniques and practices behind you that are going to help you out. But it took a long time to figure out space. Foreshortening took centuries. And there's all these examples like the image on the left where the guy has his knees, but his knees don't seem attached to his body. He's got a weird castle. The image on the right, people are as big as buildings, and those buildings make no sense spatially. There's lots of Renaissance paintings where people's faces don't seem to line up right with their bodies. They look like they've been face swapped. So it took a long time to figure out space. And just to kind of recap, there are different ways of depicting space, different devices. So if you've taken 2D design, you definitely went to these thoroughly. They are vertical location. So if it's closer to the bottom, it's closer to the viewer. If it's farther to the top of the image, it's farther away. Size, if it's bigger, it's closer. Overlapping, meaning that if it's closer to us, if it's in front, it's in front. If it's in the back, it's in the back. Aerial perspective, where things get fuzzier and less distinct as they go back into space. And linear perspective, which we'll be talking about today. So we can show some aerial perspective. We've talked about this before with line weight. So thicker lines might bring things to the foreground, where thinner lines might bring things farther away. And we'll be talking a lot today and throughout this lecture and modules about linear perspective, so a point of view. So the first thing to understand linear perspective is we need to understand eye level, which we could also call the horizon line. So if you're standing or at a normal kind of height, maybe sitting, your eye level is going to be at the middle of a page. If we're drawing, that horizon line, you can maybe go look out your window right now and see that your horizon line might be a little bit farther up. If you go squat down, it's going to go down a little bit. Okay. If you're laying on the floor, you're going to be at a worm's eye view, closer to the ground, and the eye level will be farther down your page. Or if you're sitting on top of something, your eye level might be bird eye view and closer to the top of the page. So this is really important to understand where that horizon line is, where that eye level is going to be when we're figuring out how we're going to draw stuff. And different eye levels can be used in an image for different effects. So here we have kind of a normal eye level in the middle. You can see that there is a room that's been drawn in 1-point perspective. So things are receding back. We can see that if things are below our eye level, we can see the tops of them, like the top of this bookshelf or, dresser. And if they're above it, we can see the bottoms of things, kind of like the bookshelf over here. So linear perspective, parallel lines are going to recede into the distance and appear to get closer and closer together until they converge at one spot. So up on the top of this image, where there's these kind of pattern ceiling, they go farther and farther back, they get smaller and smaller, and they kind of converge. And it actually helps pull your eye to Jesus in the middle of the composition. So here's some vocabulary we need to know. We have our vanishing point, which is going to be a single point on the horizon line where parallel lines go back towards and kind of converge. So that's where they're going to go vanish to. Our horizon line or eye level. So the overall view or vantage point that you're at, the place where land and sky meet, right? And then orthogonal lines, which are the lines that connect to the vanishing point. So we got our vanishing point, and the lines that go back to that are orthogonal lines. So we can see this kind of classic drawing that you might have done in elementary school, where we have a railroad tracks going back to the horizon line, back to our eye level. Now this might look like it's really simple, but this idea took a long time to figure out. It was actually, this painting was the first time, I believe, in the Renaissance that this use of one-point perspective happened. It happened because of this architect, Filippo. So the history of one-point perspective is very complex. There is a lot of debate about when and where it started, partially because of some of the knowledge about how to do one-point perspective has been lost because of time. There was many wars where libraries were burned, where understanding of how to draw one-point perspective was in those libraries and kind of lost for many centuries. The Greeks knew it, other civilizations knew how to do it, but when we came to the Renaissance, they were really struggling with getting perspective right. And you might think that that doesn't really matter because they're just doing paintings, but when they were doing architecture too, they didn't know how to draw things, so they couldn't actually make them in the real world. So there is this chapel, which you can see on the right, and Filippo was trying to make this chapel, but he had a big issue with the ceiling and the roof always coming and caving in because he couldn't get the math right, because he couldn't fully understand how this building would work. So he had to go study, and he had to go back to kind of the ancient world Greek, look at ruins to figure out how to make one-point perspective, draw it so he could actually accurately figure out that building. And he had come up with this funky tool where he has two kind of mirrors with a peephole, and he could see where that vanishing point was and figure out where the lines went and intersected to be able to draw that. So when you're doing something as simple as making some train tracks going back into space, just think about all the time and effort and work it took just to figure out that really basic concept. So our one-point perspective, we're going to have our horizon line. We're going to have a vanishing point where lines recede to, and those orthogonal lines going back to that. So all of our lines in one point are going to converge to that one little dot, that one little vanishing point. So the lines going back there are going to go converge, the ones that recede, and the other ones will just be straight. So once we figured out this, people were off to the races. They were doing a lot more complex paintings. The Renaissance is, gets really wild with their one-point perspective and two-point perspective. So that's the basics of one point. Let's just do this little exercise. We're going to upload photos for our points for this lecture. So grab out your sketchbook if you haven't already. You should have probably been taking notes this whole time. And we're going to go and we're going to draw these boxes in space using one point. You can start off with a pencil, but finalize your drawing with Micron. Make it your own, make it unique. But I want to see a good use of one point drawing. So make a horizon line. Think about where you want your eye level to be at. Once you do that, put on your vanishing point. Then we're going to go and we're going to go make 3 boxes. So we're going to have 3 different objects. So put your 3 boxes anywhere on the page. Now we're going to go make some of those orthogonal lines going back to that vanishing point. Then let's go make some parallel lines with our box. So we start to make some cubic looking forms. We'll kind of finish those boxes out. We'll erase our diagonal lines, and we'll add some other additional details in there. So maybe turn some of your boxes into buildings. If you want to put some people going back into space, do that. And then ink your drawing and erase the graphite and think about some line weight. So spend a little time on this and then take a photo for points for the lecture. So before we finish up this lecture, let's talk about our 1-point perspective drawing. So we're going to be doing this one outside of class. So we're going to use white drawing paper. We're going to start off with graphite. We're going to finalize our drawing with micron pen, thinking about line weight. And we're going to create a 1-point perspective drawing, and it's going to be inside. So we need to have at least 6 objects. So these objects could be like a door, a window, chairs. Needs to come up to about 6 objects, and we need to have a minimum of 3 planes. And what I mean by that, it needs to have a floor, maybe a ceiling and a wall at least, or maybe 2 walls and a floor, depending on your point of view. So we need to make sure our composition, has those requirements we've always been talking about. Things breaking all 4 sides of the picture frame, a nice focal point, thinking about balance, a good sense of foreground, middle ground, background. So have a good design. For this project, experiment with your composition. Try out different locations. Look around your dorm, look in some hallways, maybe go into the art building and grab one of the horses and find a good spot to draw. Consider where your point of view is going to be at. There's going to be a progress post for this. So that's going to help you out with that. Might be good to go take out your viewfinder, think about different locations, and really focus in on something that you want to spend some time at drawing. So choose the most interesting composition. When we're drawing, we're going to think about where our eye level is going to be at first. We can use our relative angles to find our vanishing points, which we'll have a little demo about that. It's going to be really important that we cite heights and widths in order to figure out how big things are in relation to one another. There's going to be a bunch of orthogonal lines that we need to clean up, and we're going to be inking our drawings. So we just need to really remember that we're going to have to do some finding lines. We're going to be doing the clock method. There's going to be lots of citing involved in this drawing. I can definitely give you pointers either in class or through Zoom if you need to. So our drawings should look something like this. There should be a good sense of depth in our drawings, several objects, and we should have definitely several different planes in there. But I want to okay your compositions first before you go ahead and do those. Think about where would be a good place to draw. We usually do this around Holcomb Norwood, but this one's going to be done maybe in your dorm. Okay, so hopefully that's all clicking so far. Definitely, if you haven't, go finish your drawing for points for this lecture, and then continue on with the rest of the module, and make sure to have some good photos for your progress post coming up for the 1-point drawing outside of class.